If you don't have curiosity, you're not going to be doing well in this role. Now, with the kind of AI stuff, you're always going to have a chunk of people that are really reluctant. There's a real lack of maturity. A lot of organisations around project management really struggle in terms of the maturity around how they deliver projects. So if AI can help to increase that maturity in some ways, which bit can it obviously do a better job of?
Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Project Flux podcast. And today we have Lindsay Scott, the co-founder of House of PMO, on the show. Hello, Lindsay.
Hello.
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, see, I'm raring to go. I'm really looking forward to having a chat about PMOs and AI. So, yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, I love the enthusiasm. That's amazing. And I have to say, I'm really delighted to have you on because I remember back in one of the hacks that we did, and it would have been in COVID times, you were managing a team that was the first exposure I really got to GPT before ChatGPT came out. And you did a challenge with it, and it was obviously GPT-3 or maybe even the one before then.
Yeah, it was one before.
So you kind of opened my eyes to where this was going. So thank you.
Yeah, and then we found out it was really funny. We had the challenge, and then found out that literally ChatGPT brought out that whizzy new version, something like 3 weeks later. And it didn't always work. Yeah, it was. But that's the beauty of it, isn't it? It's moving so quickly.
That jump from 3 to 4 was crazy, right?
Yeah, I mean, we were doing, sorry if I'm jumping straight in, but just to tell people what we're talking about, at one of the hack events, we got a group of PMO people together, so obviously from the project management side, and had a couple of the a data and some tech people. And what we were trying to come up with was to bring up to date paperclip. You remember annoying paperclip that used to
Microsoft, yeah.
And we wanted the equivalent for like a project version. So when you're working on a project and I don't know, you're a project manager and you want to kick off maybe creating the PID or something, this thing, whatever it would have been, pops up and helps you through prompts and stuff. But bearing in mind, this is before the chat GPT that everybody can play with now, which does it like you wouldn't believe. But back then it was like we basically got, I think, something working in 2 days.
It was amazing.
It's good fun. So yeah, I mean, can you imagine? I mean, that was probably I don't know when the chat version came out, but maybe 3 years ago or something, two and a bit years ago. So can you imagine what you'd be doing today?
We'll cover a lot more about where AI is taking the PMO profession. But before then, can we just talk about House of PMO? Because, you've built that. It's all about professionalising the PMO space. So what was missing in the industry that led you to create it? What was the pain point that you saw that you thought, I've got to do this, I've got to create the House of PMO?
Okay, most things. Most things were missing because we've been doing it been in and around and trying to professionalise PMOs since the late 90s. So for anybody who was old enough back then, project management didn't really have much in terms of PMO. We had people supporting projects, so that kind of administrative function. And then if you imagine, during the last 25 years and look at some of the PMOs, not all of them, but some of them are now, the more strategic type PMO. So you can imagine trying to get from being that supporting type PMO to where some of them are today. But there was a lot. There was no training. There was no textbooks. There was no way for people to meet with other people outside their organisations to see what other businesses were doing. Everybody was kind of working a bit in the dark. So so most things were missing. And of course, during that time as well, we've gone from, it's not just project management, but it's programs and it's portfolios. Yeah. And now we've got things like product and DevOps, so the way that businesses of doing change has changed as well, which has meant that, the PMO has to continue to evolve and change. So that's what professionalizing it means. And also for the people that work within this space is being recognized as they're not just the poor relation of project managers and delivery people like program managers, that actually they are part of the project management family. and should be seen as a profession within project management as well. So that's where it's come from, and that's what we're doing at the House of PMO, because it's never going to stop, is it? Because organisations doing change will continue to evolve the way they do that, and therefore PMOs will continue to evolve the role that they do too.
Absolutely. And I think it's amazing, the role of PMO, the way that it's advanced over the last sort of 10 years is amazing. And I see, you mentioned there, some people see themselves as the poor cousins of project managers. I would flip that and say the way things are going with AI and automation and everything else, the PMO, in theory, especially with the agents and everything coming, could become the most important person on a project, because they'll be orchestrating these agents.
It is interesting because people will, we're in that time at the moment where people are concerned, is it going to remove the role of the PMO? I think for anybody who's working today, AI will change your role, and certainly within project management, because we have debates within the community. But actually, should we be talking about the PMO role? Will be going, maybe it'll be the project manager role.
Funny you should say that. I have thought for quite a long time that the obvious way things are going to go is this consolidation of roles into an overarching role, which is then backed up by AI and agents. Am I barking mad thinking that, or is that something that you...
I don't believe so at all, because for us, if we look at the landscape of project management today, there's a real lack of maturity, I think, in a lot of organisations around project management. Even some of the largest businesses in the world really struggle in terms of the maturity around how they deliver projects. So if AI can help to increase that maturity in some ways, it's what is it going to be? Which bits is it going to choose, or which bit can it obviously, do a better job of in terms of the project manager? Because within the PMO, it's come from a space where, when I talked about it being in the early days, it was an administrative function. Actually, there has always been this role of project coordinator, which is one that sits underneath a project manager. So if you look at all roles and responsibilities of a project manager, they tend to be because they've got, they're managing the contract or the finances, or there's some legalities that does in that role. But actually, the project coordinator role, which is actually where I came from years ago, is that you were actually running a project. You were not managing it, you were running it. You were running a lot of the processes. You were running a lot of the day-to-day stuff that gets things done. You weren't necessarily directing project team, but it's not within the realms of impossibility that actually people with perhaps not having that label of project manager can still be able to direct projects, because it does happen, and it happens in industries today where certainly where they'll have products or services that are not unique. Do you know what I mean? So you come across a role where they're looking for a project coordinator who's actually a project manager in disguise in any other way or shape or form. But actually, it's because the project that they're managing is very low risk. So why do we need to have a project manager if this is a relatively low risk project?
Well, you're right, because even the role of project manager is relatively new. In the old days, it was the architect, the contract administrator. And what I find fascinating about these discussions, it's coming up more and more with guests, is this parallel. It's almost like we're going full circle, because if you go all the way back to the master builders, who would coordinate everything, it's almost like the PMO's doing that. It's almost going back to that very ancient role of somebody who oversees the whole thing.
Yeah.
So it's quite funny.
Yeah.
So do you think it'll be a convergence? Do you think it'll be a convergence then into a kind of a singular role potentially?
Who knows? This is what the beauty of it is, and I quite like this kind of situation that we're in, where we don't know. I know a lot of people don't like change, but I do quite like it. I like this stage where we're trying to work out what's going to happen, and not necessarily worried about it, but I'm intrigued. And I think one of the things that we talk a lot about in the PMO community is, if you don't have curiosity, you're not going to be doing well in this role. Certainly in terms of where it's been over the last 7-8 years with the kind of agile thing, which kind of blew up a lot of traditional ways of delivering a project in business type projects. But certainly now with the kind of AI stuff, it's like, the problem is in the community, I suppose it's like any community, you're always going to have a chunk of people that are really reluctant, scared, all that kind of stuff. It's a classic change curve, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
You've got a chunk of people in the middle that are loving the idea of being able to play with things like Power BI, so low level data type stuff, and then getting stuck into our tools within our business are putting in some AI elements. So that's what they're exposed to. And then you've got that small amount of people that are like wanting to push it, and we're curious. This could really, really change what we're doing. But I think, unfortunately, for a lot of the PMO is a head in the sand, for sure.
Yeah. That's everyone. That's not just PMO. I think that's not even just our profession. That's like, life in general and humanity in general is a little bit of head in the sand about what's coming. And I think the discussions about the sort of midterm are quite interesting, but we've got to remember we're still really, really early in this transition. I know it's moving fast, but it's still early. And what's interesting about talking to a lot of guests is that the use cases are still few and far between right now. So that was going to lead me on to my next question. So what could a PMO listening to right now, what could they proactively do with AI right now, rather than sort of saying, oh, it's going to change everything? What can they go away from this podcast and do right now?
Yeah. Well, I think we've been running sessions on it because that's what we do at the House of PMOs. Just little pieces of learning about subjects. So right now, where the PMO is starting to play, is, like I said, is if you're a Microsoft house, you can start to get into some of the tools that are coming out there. For some organisations, that includes, like the Copilot and things like that. So getting to play with some of that technology around generative AI and stuff like that. That's the obvious one. But again, reluctance around that because of the IT and security things around the organisation. But we're talking to people about, there's no reason why you can't play with that outside of work.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be bonded to the job that you're doing. So there's certainly that element that people are starting to do straight away. And what are we doing? I mean, so for example, we had a meetup just a couple of days ago, and somebody there had signed on to the apprenticeship program, the Project Data Analytics. And has been really good because then now we're bringing in people that are in that program or have done it and asking them about, well, what are you doing with what's the practical things that you're doing as you're learning about things? And that is things like being able to look at dashboards, for example. Big part of a PMO role, obviously, the whole kind of data and insights piece, and being able to get to that position where, if we've got cool dashboards, but actually from a PMO point of view, you're moving it on to the next stage, which is like, okay, so what's the story around the dashboard? Because that's the value that a PMO is supposed to be bringing to it. It's to take the numbers, take the data, but what is it really telling us about the project, the program, the portfolio? But equally, how are we conveying that to the decision makers? Because when we talk about, well, what is a PMO? What does it do? There's a lot of definitions out there, but a really simple one is that we help to enable decision making.
Yeah, that's the key. That is exactly.
Very, very simply, and without getting into what type of PMO it is and what it's doing and all the rest of it. So it's helping people to make a decision about what's going on at any one time in a project. So if you can look around at the tech and what's available right now at your fingertips, because it's been built into a lot of the tools that you've even got within the organisation anyway, it's looking at how you could perhaps, with the data that you've got, how are you going to be able to use that in the best way? Because I think a lot of us struggle with the data is not in a great place either.
Yeah, that's a recurrent theme, and it's something I think we just got to accept. But I think that's where the opportunity of AI is, that it can actually help decipher some of that bad quality data as well, especially with the inference models that are coming out.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that's we did a report. We do a report each year about some areas of PMO which are tricky or challenging. And 4 years ago we did AI, and so 4 years ago we were already
well ahead of the curve.
Well, that's because we've been introduced to going to the hack and being around great people where we're doing really interesting stuff. And for anybody who's listening to this and you're in the UK and you have that opportunity, absolutely go, because you don't know what's possible until you start to see it. And some of it's like out there, which is, but a lot of it is like, actually, this is just a little tiny thing you could do that could really make a big difference. And it's been around stuff like that made us start to talk about it. But in that report, actually a lot of it is around, let's just look at the basics of data. Because actually for many people within project delivery, they're not very data literate anyway. So can the PMO start to work at the foundational levels of what is our project data and what do we want it to do for us, and how are we managing that, and what tools are we using? Because it is really as basic as that. Because I come back to that point I made about maturity levels around project management. Take out, PMO for a minute. Project management maturity levels are not great.
No, and they haven't got the worst thing is that they haven't got much better in the time that I've been in the industry, at least.
Well, exactly. And what do they say about, you can bring a tool in, but if you've not sorted out the basics, the tool is going to not make much difference.
Yeah, and I think there's also that part of the reason that I've found is there's this almost requirement for things to be perfect before anyone will adopt it. So when the problem with the adoption in the industry is people will say, "Oh well, I've tried that, but it's it's 90% good, therefore I'm not going to use it anymore." Rather than saying, "This is amazing, actually let's put some of the flaws to one side." The good example of that, Lindsay, is ChatGPT. The amount of people that use ChatGPT, used it once, tried to use it like Google, got a really bad response back because they didn't prompt it properly, and go, "Oh yeah, try ChatGPT, it's rubbish, never touching it again." It's that kind of attitude, isn't there?
You think it's because of the resistance to change, though, because people are resistant to change, and therefore, in order for them to adopt these technologies, they really need to have this aha moment to say it is perfect to justify that change.
I think you need to be thinking, well, what's in it for me? Because actually, what we started to do, having conversations around we did a session on prompt engineering, because that's another great skill. You've got to be able to ask questions. We know that in PMO, we ask a lot of questions already. So actually, we are doing a session around prompt engineering to get them to look at the science around the questioning aspect of something like generative AI is a step in the right direction. So actually, we have done stuff around it, which is getting people to think differently about how you ask it questions. So we're learning from each other, because somebody came up with a great thing that they'd learned somewhere else, which is even simple things like where you can get ChatGPT to help you ask it a better question. So there's a thing that, I don't know if you come across it, somebody were calling it a Harry Potter prompt.
I've heard of that type of prompt. I've never heard it been called a Harry Potter prompt, but I'll
Yeah,
call it that from now on.
Yeah,
but people are not aware of that, though. You know what I
No,
mean? It's like it's like anything. It is a new tool for a lot of people. So if we can do some basic learning around that, but where do you get that from? That's the other thing, isn't it? You've got to be curious to want to be able to invest an hour or whatever to go and do that. And I think this is the problem sometimes. I think we get a bit stagnant around project management, in that we're in it and that we're doing the job. Our day job is that we're supporting projects or delivering projects or whatever it is. Having the time to put your head up for and look out, like what's coming down the line, what am I going to potentially is going to be changing the way that we do things. There's not many people that go out actively seeking that kind of thing, go to meetups, go to events, go to things like the Hack, to a very small amount. So anybody listening here, certainly from a PMO point of view, you just need one person in your PMO that is this, as we've just talked about, the one that's like, wow, have you seen this? This is fantastic. This could do this. Just one person in the team.
champion.
And then they'll kind of, it'll filter out to everybody else with that enthusiasm. But yeah, I mean, that's the littlest thing. But I think one of the other things for PMO as well is this concern about, so has the PMO now or a PMO person's got to become a data analyst? Is that where it's going?
We get a lot of those questions, not just for PMO, for most professions.
Yeah. And I know this is, I've done a lot of talking, so I'm going to ask you the question. Do you think a team like the PMO should cultivate its own kind of data person? Because in a PMO, you can have people that focus on certain aspects. So you might have a benefits specialist or a governance specialist or risk or whatever. Do you think that there should be a data one, or should they be looking to either get that somewhere else in the organisation, or do they hire somebody into the team that has already got those skills?
Yeah. It's really interesting because I know lots of people are grappling with that, including some of the institutions. Do they create a pathway for data analysts, for instance, as a route to membership? And so on the one hand, you get these kind of distinct data analysts for a profession, whether it's PMO or surveyors. On the other hand, you say actually what you want to do is upskill everyone to become data analysts, which is kind of what Yoshi and I both did, the data analyst apprenticeship, the one that you talked about. So you just gain those skills because If you don't do that, then you say, well, with AI handling more and more of the reporting and admin, and AI is starting to track more and more performance, optimize workflows, etc., if you don't do that, then is it going to keep the PMOs relevant? So my opinion is, I think just every PMO needs to upskill themselves, not just every PMO, but every professional needs to upskill themselves in some level of being a data analyst to stay relevant for themselves, not just for work, but for their own future.
My thing would be is the focus on the word analyst. I think it would be broader than being just an analyst. I think it is someone who will be able to also optimize workflows themselves. I think someone who's able to catalyze change with AI. I think there'll be many facets other than just analysts, which I think will be required. So, for instance, as we move into a world where you can just, and like you mentioned, you like to question, Lindsay, right? Those in the PMO. If you can move into a world where you can start to build apps from a single shot prompt and you can use it specifically for your use case, for me, that wouldn't just be an analyst. That would be someone who's also taking up the position of an engineer, right? So I think it's like that full fledged, just in terms of working with data, but then adding that domain expertise. I think that's going to be the key.
Yes, yeah. I think I'm thinking. I've got an open mind, by the way. That will be my answer. We do talk about it a lot about where these skills are going to come from, whether we build them within an individual already who's working within the PMO, or you bring it in. I can see it for me in an ideal world. I could see a really nice PMO setup might be that you'll take some graduates on straight out of university that have been doing this kind of thing as their degree, because I
Yeah.
think that's a really nice thing for potentially for a young professional to all is interested in the whole project management space anyway, that they'll bring in their data kind of background that they've learned from in their degree and then come in, because a PMO is a great place to grow in that respect. Absolutely. If you want to understand about projects and change, PMO is a place to get started. So I've always thought that'd be a really nice graduate type opportunity to bring
Have you found
somebody.
an appetite? Have you found an appetite with those who are younger who are coming into the PMO? So, for instance, you mentioned the prompt engineering. Have you seen that there's been more appetite or more kind of familiarity with prompt engineering with younger people coming into the profession?
I don't know, to be honest, because I would say in our community, most people that you're dealing with are probably like 25 years plus anyway. Yeah. So, but I've said it all the time. This is my issue, our issue, House of PMO, is making sure that we are grabbing some of the younger people that are coming straight out of university, because and we talk to a lot of the universities that are doing project management degrees, for example. They all want to be project managers. They don't even know that PMO exists.
Yeah.
That's so you can see where we're going in terms of maturity of the whole project management landscape.
And is there a perception that you become a PMO once you've done a stint as a project manager or as an engineer or whatever? You come onto that later in your career, rather than saying, well, actually, with what's happening with AI, it's a huge opportunity to build your career from quite a young age in PMO.
Yeah, absolutely. PMO has always been the place for a younger person to come into project management, because I think many of us will recognise that some of the better project managers that we've all interacted with in our careers have probably been around the block a few times, because meaty, risky projects are about people. And sometimes you need that kind of
An
years of
experience,
experience.
right? Like those grey hairs and saying, I've seen this before.
But to leave university and to want to be a project manager straight away, I fundamentally have a problem with that, depending on what kind of projects, because a lot of people think, oh, I'm just going to be doing some amazing big projects. No, you won't. So what do we do to cultivate? And actually, the PMO is a great place for people to learn the ropes of good project management. So but I want to attract more. So from a House of PMO point of view, we're making connections with universities and saying, look, let us come in and talk to your young students about the fact that there are other opportunities in project management. And I suspect that data, we probably need to be in a data community around project management space, probably need to be getting into the universities to talk to some of the data science type degree courses. Have you considered a career in the project space?
That's a brilliant point, because there's a lot of people in the data science community who are looking for, where do they go as a career? They don't even realise that projects or construction is a viable career. And then the PMO is a brilliant way of bringing them in. They'll come out with the absolute prerequisite skills for a PMO, wouldn't they?
Mm-hmm. Yep,
And I
absolutely.
guess, Lindsay, that's where, because you focus quite a bit on catalyzing change. And I think for those who are coming into the industry, who are considering potentially becoming project managers, you could use AI to support the PMO, just to catalyze that change for these people, to say, look, make it more aware. This is what you can do with AI. Here are some of the use cases. Here's synthetic data, all these different things. And you can use AI not just as driving insight into your projects, but using it as a catalyst for change.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, some of the sessions we've done, for example, because there's stuff out there on the web that we can use as an example. So there's certainly public sector have a lot of their documents open, and anybody can use them. So we've done sessions like, let's get a real business case and let's work through that. And let's talk about what kind of questions we would be doing to interrogate this business case, and things like that are the kind of easiest way to. There are different aspects to the PMO role, right? There's the obvious one, which is supporting projects, programs, portfolios, and we call that support of delivery. That's one aspect, but it's massive, which is why you can have many different types of PMOs. The thing that many people forget is that the other role that a PMO does is looks at the environment of which all of the projects within the business are running. So, for example, it's where the governance frameworks get set. It's how do we do assurance? It's what delivery methods we're using. It's what tools that we're putting in place. It's what training programs that we have. Yes, that's all about trying to improve the capability of our organisation delivering projects. So that's another aspect to the job. So what you're talking about is you can use aspects of AI for that second piece as well. Yeah.
But because PMOs, you're talking about, driving governance and control. The counter to that, I suppose, is AI thrives on agility and adaptability. So is there a fundamental clash there between PMOs and AI-driven project delivery, or do you think the two can be reconciled?
No, because I think this is it's a misconception, I think, about what PMOs are. Because I know I'm talking to you, James, and you probably have a very project controls view around PMO because of the nature of your industries and perhaps for excuse me, a lot of people that might be listening to this that are in the built environment or engineering type industries. From our perspective, there's also IT business type projects, of which PMOs, completely different environment, completely different kind of way of working. So when you talk about things like controls, governance, the tight controls that are needed, building a bridge, we want that. However, banking apps, agility, that whole kind of DevOps type environment, PMOs are supporting that. So this is the thing. It's about being able to. It's context.
And there's a lot we can learn, isn't there, from like other industries. So we had Alexander Budzier on the show recently from Sci Business School, and we were talking about what we can learn from IT projects within the built environment. There is an awful lot, so we shouldn't have our head in the sands with these things.
Well, really and vice versa, because when I've been to the hacks, we get very jealous about. This is from an IT business type world, looking at what you're doing and think, well, but you've got data coming out of your ears. I don't care what state it's in, but you've got data coming out of your ears, okay? IT business, still on spreadsheets a lot of time, is appalling. For some of them, not really much data at all. So where we're coming from, it felt like, right, well, we're a step below you because at least you've had traditionally planners, cost engineers, people that are crunching numbers and data. It's not like that in PMOs in IT and business. It's not what they focus on.
That's interesting. Everyone thinks they're worse off, don't they? But you're right. There's a huge amount of data that goes out the back of a project that we don't make use of. And it's criminal, really. We make the same mistakes over and over again. But I think that's where the power of the PMO could be, is also about how do we harness that data going forward to the rest of the program or the rest of the portfolio.
Yeah, and incidentally, we latest report we put out, we did a session about project controls versus PMO.
Okay. Well, just for the listeners, could you explain what the difference is? Because I know that's a question I get given a lot.
Yeah, so project controls would be considered to be a subsection of PMO. It's a role that is performed mainly at a project and program level. You're supporting the building of a bridge, building of a car park, whatever it might be. Those are very specific projects that you're running. So it's the controls around, and the clues in the title, project controls, the controls around projects. PMO is broader than that because, yes, we might be doing some support on projects, but we're doing on program, and it's a portfolio, and then the enterprise level type PMOs where they're looking at all change across the organization. So, for example, that report that we put in, what we did is got people around the table. Half of them were from project controls, half of them were from business type PMO organizations. We got them in the room together, and the upshot was that, yeah, project controls is a subsection of PMO, because organizations like yours will have controls against each one of the projects, but where's the bigger picture? Who's looking across the piece? What about the portfolio? What about prioritization of what you're going to be delivering? All of that kind of stuff gets done by a business PMO.
And that PMO could be at a client level, or it could be at an organizational level, presumably. Yeah, and that's a really good explanation. That really helps. Thank you. Can we, before we kind of move on, can we just talk about a little bit around you and some of the work that you did beforehand? Because I find a lot of the talk about AI ends up coming back to, as we've mentioned a few times, about people and about people's skills. But I noticed that you started in psychology, right? Is that right? Before you moved into project management, do you think, did that shape your leadership style at all?
I don't know about leadership. Do you know, I've never been asked that question. I did it as a degree because I just love the whole how people, how people think, how people interact. I still love it. One of my hobbies is trawling secondhand bookshops looking for old psychology books, right?
Wow.
Because to see it's one of those professions which is a bit like project management, is that actually it's still really young. So you see quite a lot of stuff that is coming up, but I didn't do it degree level, 23 odd years, how long ago it was. But in terms of my leadership, I think it's shaped who I am, for sure. I am really, really interested in people. I know I'm chatting on a lot here, but normally if you met me in person, I would be asking you a lot of questions. I'm one of these people that likes to, to listen and to take it on. And I'm looking at body language and I'm, all of this kind of stuff. I'm fascinated. But what about my leadership? I don't even consider myself a leader. So there you go.
Well,
I couldn't answer.
You're definitely leading something with House of PMO, so you've done something right.
Yeah.
But I just find it so. The more we got into this podcast now, and we've been going since April, we thought it would be a very techie podcast when we started it out. And what's actually happened is, obviously the tech's important, but the more and more we talk to people like yourself who are. And the audience here are people in the project profession. It's not for tech people. We find out it's all around the people, whether that's the positive side or whether that's the negative side, like the barriers. Always comes down to some kind of psychology. And yes. I think Yoshi's got his neuroscience background, and you find that really interesting as well, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just the way, for me, it's understanding the equivalent of AI intelligence with human intelligence. So whenever we try to talk about it, or whenever I try to talk about AI and kind of distilling it to people who are the listeners, it's always, how do you understand AI's intelligence through our own brain? So for instance, when looking at the technical pieces, it's how is this AI thinking? What sort of tasks can it do? When you're prompting it, do you speak to it more like a human? And as we move into this realm of more advanced reasoning models, we're finding that as you anthropomorphize these AIs, they actually become a lot more receptive because they think a lot more like humans. Yeah. And I find that really interesting. And that kind of, for me, that bridges the gap between those who are kind of working in the hardcore technical aspects to those who are actually in the applied part of projects. Because what we're trying to do in projects is persuade people, right, to unblock different streams, deliver our projects more effectively, understand our cost. So by making it a lot more human-like, I think it becomes a lot easier for people to adopt and use these technologies.
Yeah. No, I totally get it. Incidentally, I do treat it like a person. I do say please and thank you.
Always, because you never know.
Yeah.
It will remember the rude people.
But I talk to some of my colleagues in this space. What again, people, early adopters, whatever. I love the fact that with ChatGPT you can talk to it now because it's got that microphone bit. Somebody who works in the PMO space, and because you can pick the voice as well, they have a conversation. So they go out for a walk in the morning before work, and they're chatting to it. I'm thinking about doing this, and then it comes back. But because they're talking in a certain authoritative voice as well, so you can choose the voice. So if you know what I mean? So
it's brilliant. It's so clever.
I would just think what you were talking about there gave me another idea about where a PMO could pick, say, for example, ChatGPT up today, is, and something I use it a lot for, is trying to think of how scenarios might play out. So if I did this, what could happen, X or Y, right? So PMO, about decision making, one of the things that a lot of people do is a scenario modeling. So ChatGPT is really great, and especially if you ask it to do left field, do something completely weird, do something, I'm looking for a scenario, but what would that scenario look like in 50 years' time? To get it to come out with some really odd things. And I think that's a really interesting little game to play. You're not going to be putting in anything confidential. I think this is the problem we have at the minute, is the IT security aspects of it, that people are not using it in a work situation because they think they're sharing stuff and all of that kind of thing. So you don't have to do it in that respect. But anybody listening today is working in a project space, it has to do some scenario stuff. Think about the most, some of those situations and how they might be playing out on a project. So what would happen if this project had to stop in 6 months' time because of X? Where would that leave us, for example? And then ask it again to say, well, how would that look like if we were in a workplace in 50 years' time?
Yeah,
That's the stuff we've been playing at with, with the community is how can we have a little bit of fun with this? Because it comes back to the psychology of it. It's not a tool. It's people ultimately, and what they what are going to get out of it. And I think we're just saying at the minute we're in a stage of let's look at it by playing, which is why we're totally behind Project Hack. And every time opportunity I get when I'm talking to a bunch of people, go and have a look at it. Because one of the things, if you're not allowed to do this kind of stuff at work for whatever reason, you can go to the hack event and you can play for 2 days.
It's amazing what you can do in 2 days, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the best training course.
But this is why, James, I thought, and this was with the Jeff Woods, and James, I know that you've picked this up quite a bit now, is using AI as a thought and a partner. Because one thing that I found anecdotally, right, since using AI, was that I found myself struggling to train my train of thought. And it was because I was so heavily reliant on AI generating me content. It was doing the thinking for me, right? And when I kind of heard the words, think of AI as a thought partner, what it's allowed me to now do is not just ask ChatGPT or any other large language model to develop me some form of response. I will converse with it to train my own thought. That then stops that propensity to become a cognitive miser, and instead actually allows you to work with your brain. And like you mentioned, Lindsay, if you can reverse engineer some of these things or forecast scenarios, that allows you to think better. So it's elevating your thinking, not diminishing it. And I think that's really interesting to.
And this goes back to, I don't think people are using it properly. They're using it like a souped up Google to kind of ask a question, get a question back, whereas you should be using it and thinking of it as an assistant that's got the entire knowledge of the world behind it. And you can then, the scenario idea is brilliant. And I do that quite a lot as well. In fact, I talk to it in my car, Lindsay, and I'll run through scenarios. I had a difficult conversation to have a while ago, something personal. And then I went through the scenarios with it, and you're absolutely right. You can ask it. You can say, "Do not come back with the obvious answers," and then you can have a conversation about it. So that takes your point, Yoshi. By the time you finish that conversation, you feel like you've grown as a person.
Yes.
Yeah. I think one of the things is that as knowledge workers, which is what we all are, that's what we've got to trade in whatever happens in the future. Whatever tech we're going to be using, ultimately we are about knowledge workers. And when people say to us, can you think outside the box? How many people can do that? And actually, AI is really helpful for training you to think outside the box.
Yeah, really, really good point.
I love it. I love it in that respect. It's fantastic. And some of the stuff it comes back with, we just stop being ridiculous. That's a ridiculous idea. But like you say,
it just takes one, doesn't it? What I find is you go down that route and there might be 10 ridiculous answers, but then there might be one which you hadn't thought of, which is absolutely valid. There's always one. Before we finish for today, just ask you one question about if there was a book or a podcast or any kind of resource, I suppose, that shaped your thinking. Could you share that with the listeners? It might be something that you're listening to or reading right now, or something that you've listened to or read in the past.
Yeah, I think I'm one of these people that because of the psychology thing, so I love anything that is like that way inclined. So the usual type of stuff, like, I love the short TED Talks. because they're like 5-6 minute things. I love any kind of pop psychology thing, right? Anybody who's got any authoring. So I think the last big one was all around the different bias, like the unconscious bias and all that kind of stuff. So all of that kind of psychology stuff I really like. But I think from a project point of view, it is still, for me, it is all about people. So I'm still doing a lot of kind of reading and listening to stuff that is about the people aspects, and not necessarily in project management. It's just anything that's in that kind of like psychology type of people space. So there's podcasts like Psychology Today and stuff like that I'll pop on and just listen to what's going on in that in that science world. It's that part of it. And then over, like I said, I collect psychology books, so I'm dipping in there. But from a project, from our perspective, House of PMO, the best thing that you can do is, and what I really love, is other people's stories. So, great opportunity to chat today, and, listening to the back catalogue at Project Flux, because you're right, it's the learning and stuff is in people's stories and their experiences.
Yes, exactly.
And that's what we do at the House of PMO. So I'm obviously talking to a lot of PMO people about what it is they're doing their work, and then kind of joining dots stuff. So I like anything to do with how we can curate better, because I think that's going to be the important thing about AI, because it is so vast. How do we curate? So I'm loving all this stuff about how you can have your own, you built it, you've kind of like all of that, because I really love the stuff that's coming out in science around, I think, precision, like precision medicine.
Yeah.
I just love that whole
individual,
field.
tailored kind of medicine and things like that.
But precision stuff that's for the good. I'm not talking about precision in terms of algorithms on Instagram, which again is that science. But for me, it's going to be a fascinating space about how do we take the vastness of AI and then I can get it down to, I don't want it to be just mirroring what I like and what I'm responding to. I want it to be able to go out there and say, actually, Lindsay, we've got to know each other really well. I know that you're probably going to like this because do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And I think it's really important point you made is like, you can read loads of things around AI or anything, but nothing beats the human stories, because people can relate to that. And that's why we do the podcast, is because, and everyone's got a different opinion, because we are still so early in this cycle of AI adoption. No one's wrong. This is the point I made. No one can be wrong yet, because no one quite knows how it's all going to play out. So the best thing you can do is listen to as many points of view as possible from people like yourself and other people we've had on, and form your own opinion from that.
But interestingly, one thing that, Lindsay, I think you might like this. The other day, me and James were just chatting, and I said to James, I've had ChatGPT for a few years now, and I had a conversation with O1, and I just said to it, knowing what you know about me, what's one question you think I could ask myself? And yeah, and it gives you some really hard truths. And if anyone's listening, and Lindsay, if you just try that prompt out on the O1 or the O3 and see what you get back, because for me and James, it cut right to the heart, right?
It did. For me, it really kind of made me believe in this mission, like of making sure that we take this opportunity to use these technologies to better our profession, which was a little bit sad, but also at least I know I'm on the right track with things. It's a really good prompt. It's an awesome. In fact, we'll put that in the show notes, Joshua, for everyone to try it themselves.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm ready to have it as a therapist, but
Lindsay, where can people find out more about House of PMO and the stuff?
You just need to just go on online at houseofpmo.com, and you'll be able to join in. You can create a free account if you're into the whole PMOs thing. Come and check it out. You can also take part in events, and there's a load of material on there about PMOs. Please do come in. The door is open at the house.
Fantastic. Well, and we'll put the link in the show notes as well. And hopefully I'll see you at the next hackathon. Are you the one in March?
I'd hope so, yes. I hope so. I'm busy trying to get more PMO people aware of it and let them take the seats, But
absolutely. Hopefully. Brilliant. Lindsay, thank you so much. And we'll hope you come back on another time to give us an update of where things are going with the House of PMO. Yeah. But thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Project Flux is here.
That's a wrap for today's episode. But before you go, exciting news. Project Flux is teaming up with Project Management Global to bring you the latest in AI-driven project delivery and essential management insights. Through this partnership, expect weekly AI insights, practical tools, and expert thought leadership, ensuring you stay ahead in the evolving project landscape. Stay tuned for exclusive content, joint research, and strategies to supercharge your project outcomes. You can learn more at www.pm-global.co.uk and be part of the future of project management. See you later.
Project Flux is here.
Just want to give a big shout out to our sponsors, Construct AI. For anyone interested in looking at Construct AI, the link's in our show notes. There's a free tier that you can play around with. Yoshi and I have been using it for a good year since it was originally launched, and we get a huge amount of value out of it. So I thoroughly encourage everyone to go onto the Construct AI site and have a play around.
Cool. And guys, before we sign off, please don't forget to share, follow, and like all of our stuff. So that helps us to engage with you and understand a bit more about what you want so we can bring it to your doorstep as early as possible.